Hi, welcome to the March 20th meeting of the CNCF IoT Edge Working Group. We don't have any items on the agenda in the agenda notes document, at least the last time I looked. And that means that this is just going to be free form, birds of a feather discussion. I think our attendance is going to be light today too, because the KubeCon Europe event is going on as well. It's probably evening there now, but it's been going on. They had the Kubernetes on the Edge Day event, and then they always have some Edge related talks in the main session portion of that conference too. So I think a few of our regulars aren't going to be here this time, but who knows? Maybe they'll pop in the middle of the night and give us an update. Since we don't have an agenda, and let me just confirm that. I guess I should open the notes just to make sure somebody didn't do a late add. Yeah, we don't. This is just going to be free form birds of a feather discussion where people can bring up any topics or any items they've noticed recently that they found interesting. Just go for it. I just popped the link to the agenda notes document in the chat. So if you want, you can add your name to the attendees list. Before the meeting formally started, Kate and I were talking about conferences in general, both Kubernetes on the Edge Day, and then I recently came back from Scale. There was a workshop on WebAssembly that might pertain to Edge and a few other things related to Edge at Scale. It's probably going to be a couple days before things get published in an organized fashion there. Although if you're in a hurry, there's sort of a workaround in that the way they record sessions at Scale is they stream to Google just by conference room and day. So the whole thing gets put out there as like an 8-hour block of video. So the sessions actually are there, but it takes a while for somebody to go and edit them down to individual presentations. But it is possible to get those now, I suspect, by going at those recordings of the live stream. So let me put a link to that now in the chat. There were some talks on WebAssembly, just more Kubernetes in general than Kubernetes at Edge. And there was a track labeled embedded systems. And that one had sessions that I think would be related to running at Edge, although a lot of those were even getting down into the hardware realm. Lately, the CNCF has been publishing the Kubernetes on Edge sessions after a week or two, so I suspect those will be coming. Okay, I just dropped the Scale schedule in the chat, and on Friday, the gray column towards the right is the one with embedded related topics, but to some extent, some of those fell into other ones as well. I think my favorite session at Scale was actually a presentation by Corey Quinn. For those of you not familiar with him, he's sort of a presenter slash comedian, and he has an infamous talk he did in 2014 on Docker is Dead, where he approaches it with humor, going through everything wrong with Docker. And he did that back in 2014. Obviously, Docker survived, but he took a crack at Kubernetes this time around, taking a humorous vein at some issues of the complexity associated with Kubernetes. And that one I think was my favorite talk at Scale. It's not serious, but I don't know. He does have some valid points related to some things that can get complex when you get into Kubernetes.
I also on the like embedded or WebAssembly side for Kubernetes, um there Merlin from is a professor at Carnegie Mellon and helps lead the WASM research lab they have there. And he's very active in the Bytecode Alliance. They're actually starting an embedded working group there. So if you're interested in WebAssembly on embedded devices, they're starting a working group all about that. And Merlin's taking up some leadership with that. But they just had a conference, the Carnegie Mellon WASM Research Lab. And one of these talks that Merlin gave was about WebAssembly and Kubernetes. And it took the lens of how do I run Kubernetes on these embedded devices? And he walks through, okay, how do we slim down Kubernetes with a smaller kubelet? Check. How do we slim down Kubernetes operators? And he does that by compiling the operator itself to WebAssembly and shows that it has around 60% less RAM usage when you compile the operator to WebAssembly rather than running it as a containerized operator, as is convention in Kubernetes. And so it's a really interesting talk. I've only skimmed the first half of it, so that's already how much I got out of the first half. So I'm sure there's a lot more interesting parts to it. So just putting that on the radar as well.
I dropped another one. This was a co-located event at the Scale conference called the Kauai Summit. And this is, I would contend it is edge related, but the premise of this is that AI is reaching the point where this is going to become kind of the preferred user interface to a lot of things, just like the premise that uh, people, particularly there's variations based on age demographics, but that people contend that younger people now have gotten used to these chat interfaces very quickly and are far more likely to engage in chat for answering questions as opposed to doing something like a Google search, which is sort of what I grew up with as the preferred interface. Not only that, um, they want they expect to use this sort of interface from all their devices as they move around in the world. So one of the nice things about using a chat textual conversational interface as opposed to one that you type in like a Google search is that you could expect to use it in your automobile, from your phone, maybe even just sitting in a room in your house if you've got these uh, speaker microphones active. And I think there's a point there, but this group posed the premise that looking ahead a couple moves on the chessboard, this means that potentially all the things people got used to in terms of standardized API interfaces through HTTP become somewhat irrelevant, because what's likely to occur, the prediction is that people will want or maybe even insist on having personal agents that deal with these. So to them, it isn't a world where um, you'd be exposed to an ad that would give you a QR code or a URL, and then you would personally go there and navigate with a custom interface for every organization or business or person you interacted with in your daily life. Instead, these AI agents should be able to learn all of these things for you and just automatically integrate this to the point where, Google already in their Pixel phones has been giving some demos of tech, AI-based tech, where it could call and make a restaurant reservation for you or a haircut reservation. And they've been showing that for a couple of years, but it hasn't extended to kind of a general purpose agent that would be smart enough to just learn how to do all of the stuff on its own and maybe even um, deal with um, using APIs in addition to just kind of HTTP interfaces originally intended for humans. Their premise then is that people will want and need these AIs, but that this group doesn't want it to go down the path of something like Google search, where some commercial vendor delivers it to you for quote free, where, the old adage that if you're not paying for a product, you are the product. In other words, they're selling out your privacy and potentially double dealing. So, they used an example of, you get your paycheck, you're not going to spend it all, you want to make an investment. You want to be in the position where you could trust your personal AI agent to go invest this in some wise form of investment, rather than have this sponsored by a company that's going to take a cut and maybe sell you out in exchange for giving you inferior advice. So this is something along the lines of an open source project where this group wants to, it's really entry stages at this point, but they want to compose a nonprofit organization that will build a totally open agent that people would stand up and run on their own, so that none of their personal information gets exposed to a commercial or government entity. And you've got the privacy coming along with it. If you do catch this, they said they were going to publish this sometime this week. So I don't know that the stream is available now, but it did get videoed. And the presentation by Bruce Schneier was great. Bruce Schneier is arguably the foremost security expert in the world, and security and privacy, and he's an excellent speaker. And I have to say that the 1 hour-ish segment that Bruce Schneier put on in the middle of this Kauai summit was one of the best presentations I've seen in 10 years. So I highly recommend that. Now, how does this fit into Edge? Well, these edge agents, if you've got a compute resource, might be something that you'd stand up in your own home. Maybe these things could reach the point where you'd get some cheap appliance. I'm not sure whether it would need an accelerator. Something like a Raspberry Pi as it is today might not quite be up to the task. But the idea of this agent is that you could stand it up, or you could buy some sort of a cloud VM that you owned, where you could stand up your agent and have this thing interact with you as you go through your entire life, where, maybe the IO peripheral might be switchable to your mobile phone, to your smart TV, to whatever at any given time, but the agent sits there running 24/7 and is your personal portal to the whole world. Anyway, that's something I came across that I thought was well worth the time to check out. This Kauai AI is trying, they have meetings on Zoom every Friday to try to build this, and they aspire to getting physical meetups going in major metropolitan areas. So it is possible, depending on where you live, that there will be organized meetups about this coming to your area. Anyway, I've talked a lot. I'll give other people a chance to talk if you've come across anything interesting.
I can add another kind of announcement, or just update on a project. So the project that I'm one of the maintainers for, Ocri, we have been iterating on it such that it now supports dynamic resource allocation. So, or that works in progress. And there was a talk about that at Edge Day yesterday in Paris. So the idea being that previously with Ocri, what it does is it discovers IoT devices around your cluster and then creates Kubernetes resources to represent them. So just like you request CPU and memory, you could request a camera. Well, the device plugin interface was made for devices that are embedded in a physical node and less so network-based devices. However, dynamic resource allocation was the new specification that was added to Kubernetes to kind of target some of these more diverse set of devices. And so we've been porting Acri on top of that as well, to be able to be more fully featured. So just an update on that. And there's some really cool demos that SUSE has at their booth in Paris, which obviously it seems like none of us are there. Maybe Leon, Victor, maybe y'all are there, but they seem like very exciting demos with regards to that. And then the other thing to note is in the past, when we've talked about WebAssembly, I talked about the container shim for running WASM. And the Spin project now has a new project called Spin Cube, which is supposed to make that flow even easier for you. So it uses custom resource definitions to declare what your WebAssembly application looks like and dynamically creates services for you and handles scaling up your deployments. So that project is now been launched in partnership with Fermyon, Rancher, Liquid Reply, and Microsoft all launched this project together called Spin Cube. So I can share the link with you all if you're looking for an easy way to get going with WebAssembly and Kubernetes. And
Yeah,
that was
I'd like to
launched
see
last
that
week.
link if you, sounds great. I did take a WebAssembly workshop at scale, so I think I'm enthused to move on to the next step.
Just some suggestion. So I mean, in the open source community, I see there are two kinds of work that work groups get together to work on. One is coding implementation projects, which will be nice. I'm a database consultant, so I haven't need to do a lot of coding myself. So I'd like to do that sometime in the future. But another area that is to really get together and working on documentation of knowledge. What I feel that I know both Steve and Kate, you have a lot of knowledge in this area. Do you think it looks like bird or feather is going to be the format for this meeting a lot, at least going forward until find more specific topic. Do you think maybe good to just work on a burst of a feather kind of a random documentation of knowledge, just like what you described, right? Because what just Steve and Kate described is quite valuable information. If we can put that down on paper and make them give you more details, I think it'd be interesting and valuable information to document.
Yeah, I think we could do it. I think as once we plan for it, I think it's no longer birds of a feather, but if you wanted to nominate that a meeting is about documenting general interesting information and knowledge on subject, just go put it in that agenda notes document, and that's what we'll do. I mean, the whole idea of that being a shared document is that anybody can take a crack at deciding what we're going to discuss at a future meeting.
Yeah, we can put in that note for sure, but maybe also more targeted, sort of a landscape document. Like for example, what you described, other than what you have to talk about, is it in any other like documentation you find in the industry? Probably not, because Edge is just so vast, and so even the definition is not very uniform, right? Not consistent.
Well, in terms of documentation, there are even a few books. So there was that book by Frederick, I'm probably butchering his name pronunciation, Debian, that is actually, and he is authoritative because he runs the Edge group in the Eclipse Foundation and is responsible for 50 plus open source Edge related projects. His book is out now and it's very good. And at the last Eclipse Edge meeting, somebody brought up another book that's about to come out. I think it's due to be released within weeks. But there are some actual books on those. Now, the trouble with books is that I would contend things in this Edge sector are moving at such a speed that the spoilage or sell-by date on these books is probably a 1 to 2 years, after which time you have to view whatever was recorded there as suspicious because the world may have moved on. But those are out there. There's plenty of interesting blog sites and things. Even those, unfortunately, I continue to come across great bloggers who do it for a year, maybe two, and then sort of have other things come up in their life. And those things, those lists of even great resources that are online tend to change. Then, of course, there's the lists of just the open source projects. And we as a group, I made this attempt to do a comprehensive spreadsheet of all the open source edge related projects. And I think it's over 120 of them. I'm not sure that it has been extremely well maintained, but it's out there. So we have those as kind of general resources. There's probably more that others are aware of as well.
Example, on the RF Edge community, there is a annual state of edge report, kind of like a book. Yeah, you're right, that compared with the books, which tend to be 2 or 3 year old knowledge, which is already out of date. So
Yeah.
so that annual report is more up to date. What this group can potentially do and still be very useful information is have a quarterly birds of feather edge like report or whatever you call it. This way, it's like, for example, like this quarter, what is happening on the WebAssembly on the edge thing? Like Kate can probably be the authority on that. And then, for like virtualization, cloud computing, Steve, you have the authority on that. Yeah, I mean, I think that'd be more interesting if there's nothing else. It's just basically what's happening for the past quarter on this now. I have a lot of questions. For example, I've been Joe's from RF Edge. His book, I've been reading that. A lot of good best practices I don't see anywhere else. I haven't read the other books, so I don't know. It's his only book I'm reading. So I do have a lot of like questions, security-wise, for example. How to do machine learning on the IoT device, right? I know a lot of people are doing it by just aggregating data in a cloud data center, or do it on a gateway level, right? Because the device itself is so small, it's impossible to do any kind of at least training is impossible. But there are technologies such as TinyML, which is doing kind of a machine learning. But what is that only one? There may be other similar technologies. And for security, right now, software bill of material is very popular. It's going to start to document not only the software, but also the hardware, the firmware, the AI system, the model, the data. Is that happening for the edge as well, right? What's happening there? Is it even possible to do that? Because it's once you typically do that on the build server, you don't actually document it. There's nothing you can capture from the device itself because the device is so small. You don't store any of the INSPAM there, right? So those kind of
the
things.
devices, they're hopefully, if you've got large scales of devices, you actually maintain the configuration of those externally. Like a company that is running thousands of edge leaf nodes had better manage these things by centrally having configuration specifications and things. If they don't, I don't see how they can do it reliably. And I think the way you do these security scans is to take advantage of the centralization of the desired configuration. Now, just because that might be the desired configuration, and the reality in the world if things went wrong is you might have a few of them that don't match the desired config. But anyway, the desired config typically has bills of materials saying what containers and what versions of those containers are supposed to be delivered out to these edge locations. And because you've got databases of CVEs compared to container releases, there is tech out there that can do scans of these things to tell you which one of these might have security risks so you can engage in mitigation steps, remediation. That same technology is used in cloud, but also works fine at edge. And I think people are looking at AIs to kind of accelerate how well those things perform. It is probably possible, even though Edge has low resource, to put things there. I mean, even in my home lab, I have intrusion detection systems that can make efforts to listen for unexpected traffic on my networks and things. And I think that is potentially fairly lightweight, so that you could have these sniffers essentially looking for early warnings on attempts by hackers to crack your security. And just so you're knowledgeable that this kind of thing might be going on.
Kate is dropping off in a minute, so maybe Kate, you want to say something before you drop off?
I think I put it in chat, but yeah, I like your idea, Victor. I think we every 3 months having kind of a working group meeting that's like, this is the state of the edge, could be something that this group could provide the space. So I like that idea, and maybe we can flush it out more, like figuring out the specifics, like cadence, what are the topics, like you mentioned a few, like WASM, cloud, security. But if you have the time to flush that out, or maybe we spend the next meeting flushing that out, but kind of documenting what that would look like. And then we can start picking the dates for the first ones, if that sounds good to people. That seems like a good way of filling time, and just everyone brings like a slide for their area, and going over it that way.
So let me inject before Kate leaves, but I put a thing in the chat, and this came to mind. It isn't specifically Edge related, but it works. It's one of these things that works on Edge as well as in regular cloud. And there is a startup company that put out this AI programmer called, they gave it the name Devin. And I'll tell you, I haven't played with it personally, but I've seen people who critically reviewed it, and I've got friends who've checked it out. And frankly, the reports on how good this thing is are shocking. So there's somebody, Andrew Gao, who I put a link to a Twitter review. So, the company that put out Devin has its own recordings of how cool this is, but you always have to be skeptical of those kinds of things because they might be pitch decks and ads. But Andrew Gao went and said, I'm not sure I believe this. I'm going to try it out myself. I'm going to give it some challenges. And the first challenge he did, which is, it's at that Twitter link, he asked it to develop a website that people could go on to play chess with each other. And he thought it would be like some of these things, Copilot or whatever, where this AI gives you a few code snippets and, example code that it scraped off the web, and you've got to glue it together itself. He goes on to say, I put my request in, was kind of surprised it was taking so long, like 20 minutes, I saw nothing. And then it gives me a link saying, here's your website. And it didn't provide code snippets. It actually built the website, put it on the internet, and the thing worked. Like, it gave him a link to a working website that would play chess. I heard an account of another person who asked it to do some sort of assistant that would respond to questions on Reddit. And this thing built it out, and not only built it out, but proceeded to start answering questions and trying to charge people money for it. Like, it had set itself up to make it an income stream. So this thing isn't like a programmer's assistant. It's more like an actual programmer, and it might be better than 25% of the programmers out there. In a way, if you are working as a software dev in the industry, this might be, job threatening. But, since you were mentioning that you're aspiring to learn programming, maybe take a look at this stuff, because maybe we're not too far off from a world where a large sector of people who thought they might want to learn programming no longer have to, because something like this Devin or some other thing to come would do it for them. And like I say, the reports I'm seeing are just almost so glowing that I'm skeptical. I think I'll end up trying it out for myself. Among other things I've heard is, not only does this go and actually build full-blown multi-tier servers and things, but it actually even goes and uses open source projects, writes test cases, discovers bugs. And people have said that this thing has come back saying, I decided to use this open source project. I think I found a couple bugs. I've staged these PRs that report the bug and have a fix. Would you like me to submit them? And, you know, that's kind of crazy.
Okay. I guess Kate is off.
Yeah.
We can probably talk. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think we can talk about like quarterly.
Okay, that sounds good.
Some form
Kate
of the.
said Kate was open to that, and so am I. So maybe we won't do it in the next meeting. Let's give people runway so they can anticipate this. And quarterly sounds like a good idea for this because so far as I know, there are attempts of what are really more like polls that are done annually, you know, like the State of the Edge poll, but something quarterly might be more timely. And I'm hoping that in our meeting in 2 weeks, the people who are at KubeCon will come back with reports so that we can learn about anything interesting that happened there. But let's try to set up this quarterly thing. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, maybe publishing it quarterly. I think quarterly can be done. And maybe it doesn't has to be like formal, Linux Foundation approved
Mhm.
blog. What we can do is to discuss throughout the quarter, but at the end of the quarter have a kind of formal, even if it's just Google Docs. This is a report for that quarter, and
Yeah.
then and start sharing that. This way, every quarter we have a report, and people who just find that as you said, the 2-3 year old book that's no longer apply can find this document more useful.
Okay. So while Kate was talking, I threw out one other thing. And if you're interested in AI, the NVIDIA Dev Conference started like earlier this week, but it's still going on today. And NVIDIA, of course, makes those chips used for AI acceleration. And they actually have a number of edge sessions in the schedule. And I sat in on a couple of them so far, and they've been very good. They are kind of based on the one vendor's technology, but still, given the market share that NVIDIA has, it's still, they've got the lion's share of R&D budget. So, I think it's worth listening to.
That's good. Well, I guess just you and me then we can probably turn off the recording at least.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, let me do that.